Good afternoon. I'm R.J. Larizza. I'm the State Attorney for the 7th Judicial Circuit. I want to thank all of the folks from the media that are here today. Appreciate you responding to our press advisory and being here. I'd like to make an announcement about an indictment that was returned yesterday in St. Johns County by the St. Johns County Grand Jury. The St. Johns County Grand Jury indicted Diane Santarelli on 7 counts. Count 1, manslaughter involving the death of Jesse Pitts, a teenager resident of St. Johns County. Count 2, manslaughter involving Taylor Brennan, another teenager and resident of St. Johns County. Counts 3, 4, 5, and 6 are open house party charges involving parties that began, the first on September 26th of 2008, December 5th, 2008, December 31st, 2008, and January 11th and 12th, 2009. The final count was contributing to the delinquency of a minor, which spans that entire period encompassing all 4 open house parties. This indictment culminated from a 6-month investigation in cooperation with the St. Johns County Sheriff's Office, the Florida Highway Patrol, and the State Attorney's Office. I'm very pleased with the indictments, or the indictment and the charges that came down from the grand jury. I want to stress that this is a case of first impression in the state of Florida. To my knowledge and the research that we have done at the State Attorney's Office, this is the first time that manslaughter charges have been filed against an individual in the state of Florida based on these circumstances, which basically involve the throwing of parties where underage children are invited. They're provided alcohol, drugs, and whippets or nitrous oxide canisters. And ultimately on January 11th and 12th of 2009, when Jesse Pitts and Taylor Brennan left the residence of Diane Santarelli on this last open house party, it ended tragically. It was a preventable tragedy. It should never have happened. I'm going to turn it over to Sheriff Shoar to say a few things.
Thank you, RJ. We gathered in this room several months ago, and many of you here today were here then, to kind of kick off a campaign called The Party's Over, and it had to do with open house parties. And we recognized some time ago that our drinking rates for teenagers in St. Johns County were far too high to live with. And we also recognized that the rate of these open house parties sponsored by adults was incomprehensible and we couldn't stop teenage drinking. We can certainly try to mitigate it, but we sure can try to stop these open house parties. I want to congratulate R.J. Larizza, our state attorney, and a lot of his staff are in the back of the room. This is a courageous thing for a prosecutor to do. These guys, they dug in. The easy thing would have been to charge with contributing to the delinquency and go on about their business, but he put his investigators on that with our investigators, with the FHP's investigators. They dug down, and the more they dug, the more they found where. And before we came into this conference, Mr. Larizza made a comment to me, if there was one case to highlight this problem, this is the case. And so they did a tremendous job, and it's going to. And part of this is a message to the other adults in this community, in our circuit, that we're not going to wink and nod at these house parties. It's absolutely unacceptable for adults who are supposed to be taking care of children and nurturing children to put them in harm's way. We can't accept that. Also, we had a lot of partners when we started this campaign, and a lot of them played into this. I want to thank our YRDs, our Youth Resource Deputies at the Sheriff's Office. Talk about the value of a program. The day after that accident, we had our Youth Resource Deputies that are already in the schools, already talking to the kids. They started getting the feedback immediately. So I tell you, another program that we want to do everything we can to keep. Great job with our YRDs. The school board, Dr. Joyner was up here at this stage, as well as some of our elected officials, and he waited on it. And I talked to him this afternoon, and told him about this indictment, and he was relieved. I guess at the end of the day, it's a great example of law enforcement and public safety coming together to solve or to work on an issue. And nothing that we can do is going to bring back those 2 dead teenagers. We know we can't do that. But you know, if we can save one in the future, then this whole process has been successful. So again, in closing, I want to thank you, RJ. Great job, you and your staff.
Thank you, Dave. If you have questions, does anybody have questions?
You said there were drugs provided at this party. Could you get more specific on that?
We're providing a press release along with a copy of the indictment and a 707 or affidavit, which outlines in great detail some of what we uncovered during the investigation. But what we did uncover was that alcohol, which was beer and hard liquor, or rum and wild turkey, those types of things, as well as whippets and marijuana were provided and passed around, and in fact that the defendant actually participated in those activities with the children.
So she was present at the party?
She was present and participated.
Were there other adults at the party?
Not that we can determine. There was one witness who indicated there may have been an adult at one of these parties, but understand there were 4 open house parties over the span of from September 26th till January 11th. And all the witnesses that we talked to, no one could identify any other parents there. No, it was Miss Santarelli was there. She was the adult.
Was she related to these kids?
Her daughter, Sarah Santarelli, middle name Nan, was kind of one of the reasons for the parties. They were called Nan Fests because of Nan's middle name, and basically it was Nan's friends, high school kids that she went to high school with, that were invited. And then it got bigger as the word got out that you could go to this home and party, drink, and smoke, and more kids showed up.
How many kids are at these parties?
You know, it's really hard to tell. Some estimates are there to be as many as 50 at some. There's some that say only 15. So somewhere within that range, and it varied. I think some of the parties were were more attended than others, but typically you have one adult and you had kids ranging anywhere from 16 or 17 up to 19 years of age.
Were you able to tell if Jesse and Taylor had alcohol in their system?
Absolutely, it's in the affidavit, but I believe that Jesse's blood alcohol content was 0.18, and I believe that Taylor's was around 0.09. So both were over the 0.08 legal limit, but Jesse, who was the driver, was well over double the legal limit. And there's testimony, you'll see it in the affidavit, that he was chugging alcohol at the party in the presence of and with the defendant.
Did Ms. Santarelli did she offer the drugs and alcohol to the children at the party, or did they bring it to the house?
If you look at the affidavit again, it will spell it out in more detail, but yes, there was testimony of her actually participating and handing off and accepting marijuana, cigarettes, or bongs, as well as alcohol.
Did she see them leave the party?
You're talking about Jesse and Taylor?
Yes.
Based on the testimony that we've had from witnesses there at the scene, no.
Did she have any prior arrests or any contact with law enforcement?
I don't know the answer to that at this time.
You know what, obviously you probably do know this, a lot of trouble, serious. What does she potentially face?
Well, the manslaughter charges carry a maximum sentence of 15 years each. And the open house party counts, which there are 4, carry a maximum jail sentence of 60 days each. The contributing to the delinquency of a minor is a first-degree misdemeanor, and it carries a maximum of 1 year. So you do the math on that, it's it's a little over 31 years.
You're going to push for the full?
We haven't made a decision on what type of a sentence we'll be looking for. It's too early to do that. Right now, we want to focus on the prosecution, allow the defense to present anything that they'd like to present to us to consider, and we'll make that determination later.
Has this investigation made you aware of other open house parties that adults operate for minors?
Well, we know that there's parties that go on out there. What I can't say that we've uncovered other situations like this one. I'm hopeful that this was the only situation of its kind. It's very troubling what was going on at these parties. But no, we do not have any information that there were other parties like this going on in other parts of our circuit.
Have you had contact with any of the parents of the kids who attended these parties? I mean, were they surprised to hear this is where their kids were going?
Well, I can tell you that some of the parents, when the kids got served the subpoenas, it was a wake-up call. And a lot of them, based on what I recall, had no idea that what was happening at these parties. I mean, you know, they trusted the parents that were hosting this party to be responsible, and they had no idea that these kids were smoking marijuana, drinking hard liquor and beer, and ingesting this nitrous oxide, or whippet as it's called. So I think it was a surprise and a shock to most of the parents.
Also, as far as the parents and the kids who were attending these parties, anybody else face any kind of injury or anything like that?
Well, ironically, there was an incident involving Taylor Brennan on the December 5th party, where she actually had consumed too much alcohol and became ill. You know, I guess it was kind of a precursor to what ultimately happened with her. But that and an individual in one of the parties, a young man, probably 17, 18 years old, was so intoxicated he fell down the stairs. So we know that there were other episodes of potential injury, but nothing of the magnitude of that terrible night in January when Taylor and Brennan lost their lives.
Sure.
Taylor and Jesse, excuse me.
Sure. I know you all set up that tip line after you started that campaign. Has that, you all gotten any
Several.
tips?
We've gotten several tips, yes. And we've had, you know, we've made some open house cases in the county. But I think, you know, one of the things we talked about earlier, just that campaign, announcing that campaign and getting you folks to get the message out for us, solved, we think, about 75% of our problems. But it's still out there. As Mr. Larizza just mentioned, from this investigation, we didn't find other house parties, but we know they're going on because we're getting calls in on our tip lines, but we think between the campaign and taking this aggressive approach to enforcement, which is really saving lives, because there's not going to be another house party at her house tonight. You know, if we continue to do that, we can have a heck of an impact and save some lives.
Has Santarelli commented at all?
We don't have a statement from her at this time.
Do you see any other charges in this case? Is she going to be the only one charged? You don't know.
The defendant, Diane Santarelli, can't really say at this point. We're still investigating to some extent, and whether or not there'll be additional charges for her or other individuals is still, you know, it's still ongoing at this point.
When was the last or most recent party that she had at her place?
Well, the last party was January 11th, which ultimately ended in the death of Taylor and Jesse. She had three prior to that time.
Do you know if she had more parties prior to the ones listed here?
Don't know. Don't know. We know about those four.
You mentioned that this would send a message, or maybe you did share to other parents. Are you worried that this is going too far to prosecute her in this case?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. We took this case to a grand jury. We didn't have to. We could have simply made the charging decision, because remember, in the state of Florida, if it's not a capital offense, we don't have to go to the grand jury. We wanted the participation of the grand jury, which I consider the conscience of our community. I wanted them to hear the good, the bad, and the ugly of this case, and they're the ones that came back with the indictments. They're the ones that made the decision based on what we presented to them. But you always have to be careful about balancing what may be a civil liability or negligence from what crosses the threshold into criminal conduct. We were very aware of that, and that's why we wanted the input of the grand jury to help us make that decision. And they did.
Can I say one thing?
Sure.
From the Florida Highway Patrol's perspective, we really appreciate Mr. Larizza for his leadership in this area and bringing this case forward. I think it's an historic case in the state of Florida. Like he said, Sheriff Shoar, his officers have done a great job assisting our investigators. What you've done for underage drinking in this county is commendable. This is a very tragic case. Anytime someone is killed in an automobile crash, it's tragic. But when you have some people so young that's taken away so early, it really hits home of what can happen. We don't think these things can happen, but they do happen every day to many, many people. And the lesson learned here is do not serve alcohol to minors, no matter who you are, no matter where you're at.
Danny, you think people just don't get the message? How many times have you been up there like this?
Too many times. Sometimes we just think nothing's going to happen to us. This is something that should not have happened. Those two people should not be dead. And they're dead as a result of many factors. But one of those factors is because someone served them alcohol.
And Sheriff, they were served alcohol, but they also took it. Are y'all going to be doing anything else in the schools?
This is a continuous program, and a lot of it's education. And the folks from TV just asked the question. They asked the question to the FHP about what was the question?
When are people going to get the message?
You know, during this case, it's amazing to me, and Mr. Larizza's office has been investigating this for months, talk about due diligence. I actually had people that I know in the community come up and say, well, what's the big deal? Because at least I know where my children are. And I know they're going to, and this was their mentality, and I had to sit them down and go, well, what about the other 10 kids that are at that party? Their parents don't know where what they're doing. So, you know, a lot of this is education and perception and culture, and so it's an ongoing effort. We can't, you know, beyond open house parties, underage consumption of alcohol, and you folks have the statistics, I provided them to you before. I mean, St. Johns County has a high rate of consumption of alcohol by our youth, and it's just unacceptable. And the outcomes are too tragic. And as the lieutenant had just mentioned, we've got to continue to get the message out. I don't care if it's in a convenience store, if it's in a home. Teenagers and children can't process alcohol like adults. Don't serve it to them. They don't think the same way we do. Their nerves aren't matured the way ours are. It doesn't. There's no good that's going to come out of it. So it's going to be a continual process, and we're going to keep on it because, like as I said in the beginning, and you don't know if you save a life, but if you save one life, you've been successful, and that's how we measure it.
And this message is for the parents to not serve them, but is there going to be a different message to the kids to tell them stay away?
Oh well, I mean, our message is abstinence. Don't drink. And you know, and we've done very well with that. You know, a lot of people, you know, designated drivers. I mean, it took us 20 years, and we finally got people using designated drivers. So it's a long process. But you know, we're telling our teenagers not to drink, and most of them don't. I mean, most of them comply, but we've got to deal with it. And a lot of these teenagers are the responsible ones that have been calling our tip line, because they want to protect their peers. They know that the peers are going to go out that night, and they don't want to see their peers get hurt or killed. So, you know, it's a collective effort. We all know the outcomes of bad decisions, and there's no other case that highlights bad decisions than this case. And you know, it is a message, Chad, for the public. It's not being prosecuted to serve as a message. It's been prosecuted after months of deliberation, after bringing it before the grand jury. But you know, while we're at it, if we can get some attention from our public, I mean, why not? I mean, again, if we can save a life.
Okay. Well, we appreciate y'all being here. Thank you very much.